I'm going to introduce our speakers first. We are delighted to have Keiko Iizuka join us, literally flying into the storm from Tokyo in order to be here with us today. Keiko is senior political writer for the Yomiuri Shimbun, as well as a regular TV commentator now on politics in Japan. So literally the perfect person to have us here. I originally met Keiko when she was the Washington, D.C. correspondent many years ago and have admired her work since. And the one casualty of this storm was actually that Mireya Solis on the screen was not able to join us in person. I think the snowplows did not quite reach Mireya's house in time. But Mireya is the Philip Knight Chair of the Japan Studies Program at Brookings Institution and holds several other roles there as well. Mireya is just one of those all-stars in the Washington scene. And I've really appreciated her scholarship and friendship for many years in Washington. Welcome, Mireya. Glad that you could join us virtually.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
So let's jump right in because we have limited time here, and I know you've all sacrificed at least your shoes in order to get here today. The first year of the Trump administration has been somewhat rocky for the U.S.-Japan relationship. We've had very difficult tariff negotiations, perhaps even a strategic gap in how we view the region. So I want to ask you both, just at the top here, to tell us what do you think are the key challenges in the relationship right now? Are the strains that exist in the security and economic spheres, do you see them as temporary? Or is there something more fundamental? And feel free also to talk about the continuity of the relationship. So let's start with Mireya, please.
Thank you very much, Emma. And again, I'm sorry that I cannot be there in person with all of you, but this is an important conversation and I'm very happy to be part of it. As you said, Emma, I think it's been a very challenging year for the U.S.-Japan alliance, even though the leader-to-leader engagements actually have been very, very positive. Just a year ago when Prime Minister Ishida came and he had a first meeting with Trump, I think that there was a positive report. And certainly between President Trump and Prime Minister Takaichi, the warmth, the cordiality, the proximity, the chemistry was very apparent, and I think it was certainly a good moment for the U.S.-Japan alliance. But I think that under the current, beyond these leader-to-leader opportunities, I do see some really important challenges that we should dig into. And I see them at different levels. I see them at bilateral, regional, and global levels. And I would like to then peel the onion by tackling them in this order. When it comes to bilateral issues, I think that the main challenge is that the transactionalism that runs deep for President Trump is eroding trust in the alliance. This past year was hard in terms of these very tough negotiations on tariffs that basically amounted to an effort at economic rebalancing, if you will, but that yielded a trade deal that, as we'll get probably more into the details later on, is very asymmetrical. Because the United States raised its tariffs and then Tokyo had to commit to significantly large investment fund of $550 billion in order to achieve some reduction on the tariff. But the tariffs are still much higher than they were before the arrival of President Trump to the White House for the second time. And I think that through that process of negotiation, it led to frustration and concern because what you had, different from what had been the dynamic on trade, which has been challenging for the U.S. and Japan for a very long time, differently from walking away from the TPP, is the fact that the U.S. tariffs do impose a direct and very sizable economic harm on the Japanese economy. And that through the negotiations, Japan did not feel like a very special partner. It actually landed with a very similar deal to its peer competitors of 15% tariffs for that investment fund commitment. And that was last year, and this year we're going to have what I anticipate will be tough negotiations on defense burden sharing. So again, the threat of transactionalism, of making one-side demands, I think is one of the issues that the alliance now has to manage going forward. Then come, I think, the regional challenges, and in particular, I think that there are many issues here, but one that I think generates a lot of discussion is the U.S. approach to China. Japan never really bought into the framing of a zero-sum competition with China or all-out decoupling from China. That never really looked realistic from a point of view of Tokyo. But I think that now the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction, and that there is concern that this administration might be pursuing some kind of detente with China, that the president seems to be primarily focused on achieving a commercial deal and having a very grandiose visit later this spring when he comes to Beijing, and that is a priority that the American president, is not really pushing back, as we see China now exercising very tough campaign of pressure on Japan. And that this therefore has created space whereby Beijing feels that it will not face a significant cost in terms of American pushback for taking these measures against the Takaichi administration and Japan. And finally, in terms of challenges, and I promise I'll touch on some of bright spots as well, not to just start with gloom and doom, but I think that you asked us if this is going to be short-term or long-term. I think it all depends on the trajectory of the United States. Because if we stay in the current trajectory, I think that there could be broader misalignment when it comes to global interest, when it comes to global governance. I think that some of the actions that the Trump administration has taken this year, the reciprocal tariffs basically represented walking away from the multilateral trading system. And then the actions in Venezuela and the threats against Greenland create a very serious risk of not being a strong supporter of sovereignty, of respecting borders and so forth. And I believe that those are systemic interests for Japan. And if the trajectory stays, the U.S.-Japan alliance may turn into an odd couple where Japan remains a status quo power, but the United States now embarks on these more revisionist impulses. And in terms of to bring some warmth to our discussion, I do see some strong pillars of cooperation that remain. Certainly in the security front, I believe that there's very strong alignment on sustaining deterrence, strategic stability, especially along the first island chain. And I believe that Japan's recent security measures to strengthen itself are positive sum from a point of view of the Trump administration. And the other area where I think that there's also a strong area of alignment and potential for cooperation is economic security. And, recently there have been a number of economic deals signed between the United States and Japan. A lot of the attention has gone to the tariffs and investment, but I'm actually keeping a close eye on that rare earths deal, because it does signify that the Trump administration understands that unilateral approaches are not workable, and therefore they need to build this network of partners to address the critical supply chain. And Japan is actually a leader in that front, having made the most in reducing its dependence on China. It still remains high, but nevertheless, I think that there are important lessons that Japan has on, public-private partnerships to try to get at this thorny issue of de-risking from China. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Mireya. That was so succinct and comprehensive. I'm going to have to struggle to ask more questions throughout this course. But Iizuka-san, I'm sure that you have some other perspectives to offer from Tokyo. Go ahead.
Yes, and I'm Keiko, and thank you for having me here today. I'm so glad that I could come, and as you mentioned, this is the 70th year of your organization. I'm so honored. I feel so honored to be here. And as Mireya touched on, elaborately touched on everything, comprehensive challenges that's on U.S.-Japan security and not economic alliance. I think I just would like to say one thing. I mean, currently it seems for me that the biggest challenge for the alliance is Trump, I guess. And I feel that, and many of my colleagues and experts and bureaucrats and politicians feel that his posture of seemingly being ready to make a deal with China on East Asian security and perhaps the economy is what worries me and us most. That is the biggest challenge, I think, that is emerging in the area. That, first of all, I just wanted to point out that point.
Well, that was very direct. So let's stay with you, though, Iizuka-san, because we all want to talk about the upcoming snap election after Prime Minister Takaichi dissolved the lower house on February 8th. You are a longtime expert in Japanese politics. So we want to hear your take first on how much of a gambit was this for Takaichi to call this election only a few months into her premiership? She has very high approval ratings, exceptionally high approval ratings. But is that enough to carry what has become a sort of LDP that has been seen as in some degree of crisis over the last couple of years? Talk to us about the coalition politics involved, whether or not the opposition parties are able to emerge as a more potent political force. Give us all your wisdom, and then we're going to we're going to stack this up against the results on February 8th. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Well, actually, coming here, the biggest challenge for me was about this snap election rather than snow, because getting out of Tokyo was there was such a pressure from my company Yomiuri. Are you going out? Are you sure? So, but I really wanted to come here, and maybe as for many people to understand what Japan is going through. So I really, I'm happy to talk about Japanese politics, the current Japanese politics. And so the voting date is the 8th, and including me, all the journalists, maybe in Nagatacho, that's equivalent of Washington D.C., just very near White House, were so surprised that she finally decided to call a snap election. Takaichi once thought of dissolving the lower house at the very beginning of January, but she just hesitated and then postponed it to January the 23rd, which was the beginning of the Diet session. So, I mean, it was obvious that, she was not fully determined to call for a snap election. But I think what made her decide to call an election was the major reason is not her political base is not solid within the parliamentary system, and at the same time within the LDP. So she wanted to call an election, and if she wins, it's like perhaps she actually said that this is election. If it's me or a Noda or a Saito, I mean, it's the election of me or other opposition parties' leaders. So if it falls short of majority by the LDP and coalition partner Ishin, the Japan Innovation Party, she made it clear that she will step down immediately. That's quite different from her predecessor, Mr. Ishiba. Ishiba didn't make it clear, and that was the main source of his trouble. I mean, because he could not get majority, and he did not step down. So that just made a big problem for him. And so I just would like to point out the significance and meaning of this election from the international aspect, because it's quite a rare election, because she says that she is going to build a strong Japan in terms of both security and economy. So meaning that she is quite certain, she has made it clear that she is going to build a strong defense, from military aspects, make a stronger country. So meaning that if she wins, she would perhaps make proceed for building up militarily, and if she loses, perhaps that will not be reality. So, I mean, usually a Japanese domestic national election, is about its consumption tax or economy or social welfare. But this time it's about, also the economy. But this election is about security and military buildup. So for perhaps China, that's what irritates China. So China wants to perhaps avoid or eliminate her politically, or maybe I don't know, internationally pressurizing her to make her weak. But anyway, I would say that this election that's going to be voted on February 8th is, in recent years, very, very rare and important election.
Thank you. I wanted to stay on this for just a second. Do you think that with the departure of Komeito from the coalition and now joining with another party to form a new one, first of all, do you see them as being a stronger political force now that they've joined together? And particularly on the security front, have they managed to draw a distinction between their platform and that of the LDP Isshin no Kai coalition?
Well, thank you for asking that very important question. And, it's a rare election in terms of that point as well, because Japan has not had a strong opposition party, maybe nearly 2 decades, but this time around, the biggest opposition party, the Constitutional Democratic Party, CDP, and the former partner party, Komeito, merged in and formed a party called a Centrist Reform Alliance. It's a little bit awkward name, Centrist Reform Alliance. Okay, and but anyway, it was just formed 15th of January. I mean, what date is this? It's January 27th. It has not, just 12 days, and but they argue that they seek for the center ground. Because LDP has went too far right, so they seek to find a middle ground, and try to eventually they try to pursue a middle ground, bigger political alignment. But at this moment, and the voting day is February the 8th. And not very many voters even know the name of the new party. So apart from their platforms or policies or pledges, I mean, they will have to make the voters write the name of the Centrist Reform Alliance, which is, I think, physically especially for elderlies, it might be difficult for them to write. So it was Takaichi's strategy or tactics, to call for a very snap election, so that opposition parties were not ready at all.
Right, they had to scramble to even put together a party.
And I would like to just point out one thing about this new party. So Komeito was, up until last October, was a ruling coalition partner. So their platform is basically in line with LDP. So this time, the biggest opposition party, CDP, they made a great concession in terms of security policy, which was quite historic. I guess it was about, there are two major concessions. One is about peace and security legislation that was, made in 2015 under the Abe administration. And they used to argue that it was unconstitutional. And then they changed that. And then the second concession is opposition to nuclear power. I mean, they used to say that it was unconstitutional and, not unconstitutional, unconditional opposition to nuclear power. So they changed that. And then the reason why they wanted was they wanted the votes that Komeito has. But anyway, it's going to be a great security policy turnaround that has not taken place for many, many years. Maybe since 1995, when Prime Minister Murayama from the Socialist Party, he admitted, he made it clear that the self-defense forces, Japan self-defense forces, is constitutional. And then national anthem and national flag is, he for the first time said that it's national. And up until then, Socialist Party was against it. So since then, I think this is the first time of great security policy turnaround in Japan.
Right. It's come a long way. Thank you for that. And we could talk about this for hours, obviously, but I want to move on to some other areas. Mireya, feel free to comment on what Iizuka-san said about the election, but I want to get back to the trade deal. You mentioned a bit about this at the top. Obviously, these tariffs are, somewhat harsh, but if you could talk about the investment side of the deal, because with Japan expected to invest $550 billion in the United States, I at least have not seen a clear message or strategy coming from Tokyo about the sectors that they would be investing in. And I think it's getting, time is tight for them to come up with this. I see them being sort of outmaneuvered by other countries like South Korea and being really forward-leaning in shipbuilding. So what's your sense of which sectors Japan will invest in, and whether have any of these efforts started yet and they just haven't been broadcast? Talk about the investment side of this deal that was so important to reach.
Thank you, Emma. And it was fascinating to hear Keiko talk about Japanese politics, and I would love to get into that conversation more, but I know time is short, so let me just stay with the investment question, because to me this is really the essence of the deal, right? That you get tariff relief by committing. In the case of Japan, the funds represent something like 12% of GDP. And when Japan is dealing with the security concerns, with the safety net concerns, with how to improve, living standards and tackle inflation, every yen counts, and therefore this is a very, very high commitment. And It's also striking because we're now going to have what I have referred to as managed investment, not just managed trade, in the sense that now governments, both Washington and Tokyo, will play a very important role in putting this together. And therefore, the implications, if this works well, great for the alliance. If this does not go well, then there could be waves along in the horizon. And this is very clear. Korea just got a taste of this in the last day or two when President Trump threatened again to raise back the tariffs of 25% if the Korean Assembly does not approve the trade deal quickly. So if this does not take off smoothly, there is significant risk, and there's going to be risk throughout for the approval of each specific project because the United States put in this snapback clause. And if Tokyo exercises its veto power and doesn't want to go for one project, that would be grounds perhaps for the administration in Washington to bring back the tariffs. Now, what do we know about the projects? Well, we know from media reports that the binational consultation committee has been set up, and they have been discussing projects. Japan, trying to make lemonade out of lemons, has identified from early on economic security projects. The idea is that then this could yield win-win outcomes. And I think that, time is now approaching to announce a specific concrete projects. And why I say this is because Prime Minister Takaichi, if she wins the election and stays on, she wants to come to Washington in March, which I do believe is the most likely outcome. But if Keiko's not making bets on what the outcome might be, I will not either. But anyway, she wants to come in March ahead of the Trump visit to Beijing later in the spring. And I think by that time, there is a sense that some concrete proposals should be already rolled out so that President Trump sees that outcomes are there, and these then become a venue for complementary economic interests and not a source of friction. But it's still, for people watching from the outside in, like me, we don't yet have a clear sense of a specific projects, just broad strokes of what this could, the sectors that this could be priority. I think we can expect a lot on energy, power generation. The idea is to help the United States advance its AI transition and data centers, and other like high precision projects might be considered. But I get from the question you were posing, Emma, that South Korea and Taiwan have a story to tell in terms of the specific sectors that they excel at. South Korea with Taiwan and South Korea both semiconductors, of course. But I think that with Japan has broader capabilities, and therefore they're looking at a wider range of products. And more than the messaging, I think that what's really now important, that weeks ahead of a potential Prime Minister visit to Washington, is to have the actual commitments, at least for a couple of landmark projects, so that this seems that is moving forward and has not stalled.
Great, Mireya. I'm going to stay with you for just a minute, and just briefly, if you could talk about other items on the economic security agenda. This was a really key emphasis of the last administration. What progress has been made, and what are the prospects moving forward in terms of securing these supply chains?
Well, I think that we've been distracted in many ways. I think that last year was lost in fighting the tariff issue, and I think that has been regrettable, because I think that that gets Tokyo to be more on the defensive, and all the energy has to be on, how we make sure the tariffs go down and how we get creative about this investment package. I think that the most progress that I see is happening in terms of, again, redoubling the effort on supply chain resilience on rare earths. And I think that in that agreement, there are some specific mechanisms that have promised, like offtake commitments, and the idea that there will be joint financing, and how we actually land that remains to be seen. But if anything, I think that critical mineral diplomacy might be the one area where we see progress. Having said that, I think that our partners also have a bit of confusion, because it's not like rare earths just emerged as a huge important topic starting this a year ago, when the arrival of the second Trump administration, there had been ongoing efforts such as the Mineral Security Partnership, and now the Trump administration is launching something else like Pax Silicon. So I think that leaves our partners not sure because they invest in a mechanism, and then the next administration is putting its eggs in a different basket. So I do believe that there's a lot that can be done on supply chain, and this is going to be very critical in light of the Chinese pressure campaign that we can talk about that now seems to be hinting at also restricting Japan's access to rare earths.
Thank you, Mireya. That's very helpful. I want to turn to the alliance now, and the modernization and coordination efforts, and how they fared under the Trump administration generally. Is it possible to keep momentum going when you don't have high-level meetings like the 2+2 meetings that the Trump administration has not yet held with Japan? And I wonder if you could particularly talk about advancements in intelligence sharing. I understand that there's a new body or agency to coordinate Japan's intelligence. If you could comment on those, that'd be helpful, Keiko.
Okay, that's a great question. And I think, apart from Trump and his close aides, the U.S. bureaucrats and the U.S. forces are quite tight and working very hard to maintain the alliance. I don't think that it has changed since in just 1 year of his administration. And up until now, I think that quite luckily, because Trump has focused or concentrated on tariffs and some other issues like Venezuela, I think up until quite recently, Japan-U.S. security alliance has not been actually affected by Trump's transactional behavior, I think, because those there are layers of people who really are devoted to maintain the alliance, and up until now, I actually asked both of the self-defense forces and the U.S. forces in Japan, and then they are really devoted to maintain the alliance. They have not changed. And also, I hear a lot that on the U.S. side, there's not the necessary personnel designated to deal with, let's say, nuclear deterrence or some other areas. But so that's what you say about the 2+2 has not been held yet. But I think it's from now on that Japan will have to brace for the impact of Trump focusing on West Hemisphere, and then perhaps Trump might turn to perhaps South Korea, and maybe consider withdrawing U.S. forces on South Korea, or maybe he might actually think, give it a think about decreasing U.S. forces in Japan, and so the impact has not been done to U.S.-Japan alliance, but I think that Japan will have to prepare for it from now on.
Yeah, just to be a pushy moderator for a second, I agree with you that operationally the resilience of the alliance has been quite impressive. But I wonder if true progress on integrating command and control can be made in a meaningful way if you don't have that high level political buy-in. But one other area, we have host nation support negotiations coming up this year, and those promise to be pretty tough. So do you have any predictions on how that will play out?
Yes, host nation support. It's every 5 years renewal. So 2026 is the year of renewal. So it's under Trump administration. I hear that Japanese, especially Ministry of Defense, is quite praised for the high demand, high claim of increasing the host nation support. But I think that I think Takaichi's approach, and Takaichi is fully aware of this challenge, and from what I construe from what she says, her approach is to not to be too dramatic, perhaps incremental, and show efforts of responsibility, taking the responsibility, and then not to have a head-on confrontation with Trump, I think. So I think with regard to host nation support, it will be increased, but politically, she will try to make some negotiation with Trump and his aide that don't make it like twice of the current budget. And I think that the Takaichi will be able to make a performance or good performance to persuade that part. But it's a critical thing, because whenever Trump thinks that money is not coming from allies, he gets aggravated and claims very high demand. So but I hear well, actually, I've heard from Takaichi directly that she will try to try to take responsibility and incremental. That's the key word, what she said. So I hope she will make it, as she says.
It's an interesting strategy. Not incremental is not a term you usually hear to describe the Trump administration. Mireya, turning back to you, both of you have referenced that the United States has, made an effort or has decided to focus more on the Western Hemisphere, as we know from the release of the National Security Strategy. What's your sense of what this means for U.S. engagement in the Indo-Pacific region broadly? And at the same time, we've had the Trump administration withdraw from several dozen international organizations. You've written a book, a widely acclaimed book on Japan's quiet leadership. Do you see Japan emerging as more of a leader as U.S. engagement and global leadership seems to recede a bit?
Thank you very much, Emma. So, yeah, I think that, where is the United States going? What is the strategic direction, and how is the United States thinking and conceptualizing of the Indo-Pacific are critical questions for how Japan will navigate the current era. And, the national security strategy of the United States highlighted two priorities: Western Hemisphere and Indo-Pacific. And sometimes I hear people around, the Trump administration make the point that this doesn't mean retreat from the Indo-Pacific, that they don't see major trade-offs at work. And I see these usually the arguments, to make this point come in two different ways. One is that it's not that the United States is retreating into so-called spheres of influence, and therefore only mind its neighborhood, but actually that by pushing China, having pushback against China's influence in the region, that weakens China globally. So it all adds up, it all moves towards the same direction. And the other argument I hear is that, the Trump administration may be very fond of its Gone-Road doctrine, does like the concept of a sphere of influence, but it doesn't mean that it's going to consistently apply it elsewhere. That is, that the U.S. gets to keep its own sphere of influence, but will not give China its own sphere of influence in Asia, and therefore that we should not expect these to dilute the commitment or the level of effort vis-a-vis the Indo-Pacific. I'm actually skeptical that it will be possible to smoothly operate like this and, do the kinds of actions they're doing in the Western Hemisphere and that not become a drain of resources, a drain of attention from the Indo-Pacific. I think that, the situation in Venezuela remains very fluid. It's going to be very difficult from an offshore boat, so to speak, to be able to manage a country. And I think that the risks that the U.S. is more and more vested in handling the now more turbulent situation in the Western Hemisphere and Latin America in particular, that could become a distraction. And certainly, we don't even bring this notion anymore. It has become a little bit like obvious that the pivot never happened and certainly is not going to happen anytime soon. So that I think is an important point to make. The other one is that how is the administration identifying its core objectives in the Indo-Pacific? What does this mean for Japan and everyone else who actually lives in the neighborhood? And if you read the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy, I think that it's very clear that the ultimate objectives or the lens that they're applying is actually one of economics, which also is so different from what we expect the United States to be prioritizing. In the National Security Strategy, China is first and foremost discussed as an economic challenge, as an economic opportunity, as signing that all-important deal. But then in the National Defense Strategy that finally was released just a few days ago, the way they phrase this is that they want to prevent China from dominating the region because these would, and I'm reading here, veto Americans' access to the world's economic center of gravity with enduring implications for our nation's economic prospects, including our ability to reindustrialize. So again, the region is trying to understand what drives this administration, and it seems to be an economics first issue. And certainly it's not an economic engagement approach, but is making sure that the United States does not lose access to this vitally important region. And then comes, of course, the recent withdrawal from scores of international organizations, and that's going to make life harder for Japan too, because it means that its resources will be spread more thinly in order to sustain economic development, in order to address many of the pressing issues that the region needs to be dealing with. So I think that, from the point of view of Japan, the Indo-Pacific strategy remains the key grand strategy to pursue this. I think that Japan will continue to double down in its connectivity strategy and therefore to sustain, supply chains, to sustain rules-based trade, to provide economic assistance, but resources will be spread more thinly because Japan also is dealing now with challenges coming from China and coming also from this the direction of the United States, just pivoting away from some of these very important international organizations. And I do think that, and this is more a question for to bring back to both of you. I'm also watching, how Japan is going to respond to some of the recent initiatives of the Trump administration. Now that they have sent invitations to the Board of Peace, so-called Board of Peace, I think that these could end up weakening the United Nations. And I think that this is, again, the kind of very uncomfortable choice that Tokyo needs to make as it seeks to keep the alliance robust, close, find areas to work with the United States, but where the United States is actually taking actions that can be seen as damaging international governance.
Yeah, for the Board of Peace decision, I think we need a nice long bankyokai for that to really study all the options. We're getting a little short on time now, but although this conversation is mostly focused on the bilateral relationship, I want to broaden the aperture just a bit here and talk about the trilateral with South Korea. I think that particularly because there's a conservative prime minister in Japan and a progressive president in Seoul, this has been surprising. All this feel good summitry, drumming it out in Nara. What do you think is driving these relations? How optimistic are you that they will continue? And then, Mireya, if you could address, I'll ask you first, Keiko, but do you think that South Korea is serious about joining the CPTPP? And would that be sort of the most substantive thing that they could do to drive this bilateral cooperation? Keiko, why don't you take it first?
Okay. I think in the short term, relations between President Lee and Takaichi personally will perhaps stay positive because I think both need stable ties to have regional stability and economic security. So they both need stability. So it's to their benefit for both of them in short term. But maybe in the longer term and the midterm, I think they might go back to history issue as well. And then and one more. The important point is that the different views about China. I think that makes Japan and South Korea, there's some gap between two countries. Obviously, South Korea is trying to balance Japan and China because of their geographical location. It has to do that, and Japan is not trying to balance the relationship between China and the U.S. or whatever. So, and that's one big concern for Japan, I think. And domestically, I think South Korea is expecting they are going to have in June local unified election, and so President Lee. He will have to win that election in order for the administration to strengthen the tie with Japan. So I think it's quite close that both countries' domestic political base is not solid enough. So up until June, no clear announcement of trying to strengthen the bilateral relationship, I guess.
Mireya, what about the CPTPP possibility?
Thank you, Emma. Well, I would, first say that I think it's important to note that the Japan-South Korea relation already passed an important test with that political leadership transition and the fact that you have this combination now of a conservative prime minister and a progressive president thinking pragmatically. And I think what's driving what we're seeing so far is a pragmatic take on the limited choices and more constrained space that both of them have, and therefore they need to try to keep things working better. I also would give kudos to their PR teams. I think that drumming session was very well done because it showed that the two leaders can relax around one another. But like Keiko, when she was addressing some potential roadblocks, I do believe that anyone who has followed Japan-South Korea relations must be, of course, aware that nothing is guaranteed and that some difficult issues must be tackled. When it comes to the trade issue in particular, I think that certainly when they were each negotiating with the United States, they were not coordinating at all. And actually, they were trying to compare notes to see who was striking a better deal. So that didn't create a sense of cohesion, right? Who had the better terms when it came to that investment fund. Now, I do, as you know, South Korea has been considering the possibility of joining the TPP and later on the CPTP for a very long time. And for different reasons, they have not done so until today. I think that the time is now really even more critical for South Korea to consider CPTP membership, because one of the anchors of their trade strategy, that is the Chorus FTA, has actually been hollowed out again by these Trump tariffs. So I think that they clearly now need to be thinking and be bolder, and that explains why President Lee, actually, this is what I think is the most important signal, that he said explicitly that South Korea is interested in joining CPTPP. For Tokyo too, there are, of course, great benefits if South Korea were to come in. I think that, Tokyo, cut its teeth in international leadership by rescuing the TPP, but as always is, well, how is the CPTPP fit for purpose for the current reality? And the challenge here is to make sure that the CPTPP does not stall, that it can bring important members in. Sure enough, they have a conversation with the European Union and ASEAN, but that's not towards immediate membership, but other forms of cooperation. I think of all the candidates right now, South Korea would be the most desirable to join CPTPP. They would add economic heft, and also because South Korea could live up to the standards of the CPTPP, because the other concern for Tokyo would be a dilution of standards, depending on who is the new member. But there are, of course, issues that need to be saved and solved. And we know that trade and domestic politics are joined at the hip. And South Korea has been, I think, a little more cautious about CPTPP in general, because they feel that the domestic politics could be tricky. Sensitive issues are there. Agriculture, CPTPP has very large agricultural exporters. But when it comes to Japan in particular, I think that the issue that's going to be hard is the seafood ban that South Korea is imposing, and where they would like Tokyo to show some flexibility as a condition of entry, given that they feel that, the seafood issue could be like in terms of how much public emotion there is when you think about the negotiations with the U.S. and beef. Now, I don't sense that Tokyo is obviously going to give them that kind of flexibility. So how they have clear geopolitical, geoeconomic incentives to find a way forward. Domestic politics are always going to be the hardest to square.
Perfect. Now I'm going to take a couple questions from the audience because we started a little bit after the hour, but let's collect a couple if you have them. If you can raise your hand, and Brianna will bring you the mic. Please introduce yourself and give us a succinct question. Thank you.
Oh, hi, my name is Tian. My question is, I think it's been unclear compromising to Trump gives you a better deal, and maybe standing up to him actually yields better result. And I think recently European countries and Canada have been seeking more strategic independence, what they call principled realism. And do you think Japan might take similar strategic repivoting? And if not, why not?
Let's collect a few. Alicia, go ahead.
It's on?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Alicia Ogawa. I work with a lobbyist in DC on U.S.-Japan trade, and I've been, in my career, a financials person, so I advise a lot of activist funds. And my observation is I see many things to admire about Takeichi-san, and yet it seems her two biggest achievements have been infuriating China over her Taiwan comments and destroying the bond market and the Forex market. And in particularly the last one, we've all been watching this with angst for a year or so, but, her economic advisors seem to be committed to this reflationary policy without any regard for the fiscal balance. All the things that you and Mireya have talked about rely on a strong economy and a strong national balance sheet. Do you think that this issue will interfere with her popularity going forward or her chances in the election?
Okay, let's take one more in this lightning round. Jim?
Thank you very much. I have a million questions. I really like the security one, by the way. But my backup question is really on this investment fund, which strikes me as completely bonkers. And it's hard to see that ever materializing. So 1 year, 2 years down the road, how do both sides walk down from this? Or does this create an economic rupture with the Trump administration and Japan?
Okay, lightning round. Mireya, do you want to go first? And then we'll turn to Keiko.
Thank you. Great questions. I wish we had half an hour, so I'll be very quick. The Davos speech from Mr. Carney, I think that he really captured the moment. I do believe that we're in a rupture, where great power competition is becoming more brutish, harder. We're talking about now, principles of, economic or practices of economic coercion, land grabs, all of that now has become part of the ecosystem we seem to be living in. And, I think that Carney made a call to actually, call it out and resist it. Will Japan follow suit? Can Japan be taking that more openly critical approach towards the United States or openly organizing in this manner? I think that that's going to be hard for Japan, even though the diagnosis of where we're at is absolutely correct, just because of the reality that, Japan lives in close proximity to China and only has one security partner that can come to its aid. But that does not mean that many of the things that Carney said in that, speech are things that actually Japan is doing quietly under the radar and to strengthen its own capabilities and to think about how it creates new partnerships. But the style, I think, will be very, very different. So all these, security reforms, the emphasis now on strengthening the industrial base, the all-out diplomatic outreach to different countries or partners in the region, the different way in which Japan now uses strategic economic assistance to also increase the capabilities of Southeast Asian countries. All are things I think that give Japan alternatives, create more space, more capability. Sure enough, they help Japan prove to the United States a more capable ally, but also it gives Japan strategies, alternatives if the United States proves to be inconstant. And just briefly, because I know we're at time, on the bond market reaction, I think this is where, this is going to be critical. I think that Prime Minister Takaichi, the way I would describe her, she's a security-first Prime Minister. I think that she's focusing national strengthening, security reforms, and economic security are her calling cards. And she's now using, big public spending to restart growth. She's trying to make the case that there is a positive cycle where you invest in economic security sectors as regional development projects, growth opportunities. But, it's a huge bet. This works if this really restarts economic growth and if there isn't a more immediate market reaction like the one we saw recently. And I think that it's going to be one that is going to require the utmost ability, and one that I would be keeping a close eye on, because this is where actually Japan's debt constraints begin to make a very, very serious constraint on what is going to happen on the on the management of the economy.
Iizuka-san, you have the last word.
Yes. I think, there's some common points. We've received 3 questions, right? And the big, very important point and the Japanese strategy from now on is that there's a shift, as the gentleman pointed out, about strategic independence. There's inside the Japanese government and policy experts, I think the awareness is spreading that, we have to wake up and not just don't rely and depend on the U.S., but we have to, be more independent. And the U.S.-Japan alliance is, of course, the most important, pillar of Japan's security. But there's a shift do not just depend on the U.S. 100%. So I think, there are many experts and officials, policymakers that we are building up the network, especially with Australia and South Korea and the Philippines and EU, European countries. So and from security perspective, and at the same time from the value-based international order, I think Japan, it's becoming quite a strong awareness that Japan should lead this kind of networking. So as the gentleman pointed out, I think Japan, there's a growing awareness that it has to happen there. And at the same time, the quite different point about, why Takaichi is going too strong about, inflationary economic policy. And I think, it's quite a different religion that she believes in. And there are many economic experts who are concerned about, her big economy. And we are not sure if triple, cheap going down the stock market and currency and all the and one more thing, everything's going down. And so many of the economists are warning, but the economic experts surrounding her are quite extreme. Yeah, very extreme. So, and she doesn't seem to, at this moment, care about other religions. I think so. We'll have to see if this actually works. And I'm sure that Japan cannot afford to, go down in economy wise. But I don't think that there's no sign that she's changing the course. So that's we will have to see. Yes. And sorry, one more point.
Okay.
It's about the investment package. Last year, around the summer and nearing fall, there is a lot of talking that this economic package, investment package, it's really vague and not concrete, and no specific agreement written. Quite different from the one done made with Britain. So, but on the Japanese side, bureaucrats and economic world, this is better because it's a long-term agreement, and we just should not go into specifics because we should not be committed, and so the vagueness is the beauty of this agreement. So that's the reason why. So I know that, Emma, that you are concerned that no specific, South Korea is really preparing for the, all the concrete packages. But I know Toyota and the SoftBanks, those are, pledged for a big promise, but big investment. But other companies and other private sectors is sort of, it's better not to go into specifics. So that's one of the, I don't think, in a bigger picture, I don't think it would work, but that's one reality.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up here. I think you'll all agree that we've covered a lot of ground from with our talented panelists here. And not that anyone's keeping track, but when's the last time you saw an all-female panel talking about Japan? In a nod to Japan for electing its first female prime minister. So another round of applause for our panelists, and everyone stay warm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.